Kia ora, Mark Ferguson or Ferg here. Lots of people out there breeding sheep are really passionate about what they do and sometimes just feel a little bit lost in making the right decisions around the genetics that they're using or the genetics that are available to them. Today's video is really about a few tips to help people navigate that little complex world around sheep breeding. We do that for a living. If you want to know more about what we do at Next Gen Agri, jump on the website or jump on the hub and have a look around. We help people work through this. But today I'm going to cover all of the from the ram to the ewe, some of those tips about what we need to cover. I'm going to start off talking about, I guess, the opportunity in genetics, and that is genetic gain, and these are relatively low numbers compared to what are achievable, but these are sort of within the reach of every sheep producer. So I think as an industry, we probably do less than 1%. I don't think anyone could claim much more than that, depending on where you are. The dairy industry can sort of lock in at 3 or 4%. Some of the intensive industries are probably even higher than that. I guess what is possible, and we've seen it with our clients, we see clients that year in, year out are doing that 4 or 5% within our ram breeding clients if we do everything right. And so that's kind of what should be attainable. And when we think about that number, that's kind of knocking off inflation. So while inflation's been pretty steep in recent times, if our genetic gain as a minimum can keep us in the game in terms of just keeping up with inflation. And the beauty about, I guess, the other thing about these graphs is that curve is not just the way you're seeing it on your screen. That's reality. It's compounding, and it's like compounding interest, genetic gain. You get gain on the gain you made last year, so it compounds. And so, and I guess from that graph, the answer is always start yesterday. Like the saying goes, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, and the second best time is today. And it's the same thing with genetics. Get onto a decent breeding program as soon as possible, because you don't really have much time to waste to get the most out of your sheep enterprise or beef enterprise for that matter. So today I'm just going to run through, I guess, the need to clarify where you're at, and then sort of some simple steps to take, and then what that future potential looks like. And we've sort of covered that really already, that 4%, 5% is part of your future. But I guess the important thing we'll get to in a minute is the simple steps to take to make sure you're doing what you can to have a good breeding program within your sheep business. I think the important thing to remember is that what got us here won't take us there. Not my quote, it's Marshall Goldsmith's quote, and you would have heard it lots of times probably, but it's so true that our old ways of doing things were great for the time or were appropriate for the time, but we've got so much, our tools are getting better all the time, and our information is getting better, our knowledge is getting better. So it simply makes no sense to use the same process or the same mechanisms that we used to use or that we might have been taught to use decades ago or even recently, depending on how updated who was teaching us. But there's just such great potential in using all the tools available to us, and we don't need to dwell on how it used to be done, because that's not how we're going to do it going forward. So if we think about one important thing, is most sheep farmers see their own genetics under their own management, on their own farm essentially. And so your ability to know whether it's genetic or your management that's causing a particular concern or a particular good outcome is really hard. You might be the best manager of nutrition in the world or in your district and have really good sheep that have lots of lambs and do great things, but that might be mostly nutrition, and your genetics may be subpar, and the vice versa. You might have amazing genetics, but either through circumstance or through management, you can't feed them as well as they need to be fed to achieve that outcome, and therefore they're not producing as well as they could. But your genetics, there's nothing wrong with genetics, but you might think that you need better genetics because they're just not doing on your farm, but it might be something else that's going on. That so the point of all that is that you really need to work out which bit is which on your farm, and that's not easy, but it's not particularly difficult either. And that is just working out, right, what is genetic and what is management or nutrition on my farm. And so if you're in Australia and you're running merinos, there's a simple way to do that. Or if you're anywhere in the world, actually, if you've got merinos, you can send it to Australia, to one of the DNA companies there, and you can get what's called a flock profile. So genotyping using the DNA of 20 individual animals sent in. You'll get breeding values based on the Australian system for the average of that flock, which really gives you a great foundation to say, right, here's our strengths and weaknesses. If you compare that to the percentile band table, again, that's what we do for people. If you need help with that, get in touch. That's something that we see a lot of value in, particularly as clients are starting out with us. If we know where you're at, we can really get things moving. But you can do this on your own and get in touch if that's something that's of interest to you. You go to either Zytovet or Neogen and go to their websites, you'll find opportunities to do flock profiles. But we'll get in touch with us and we can steer you in the right direction. But that's one great way if you're in merinos. If you're outside of that, then you don't have that option. And that might change in the future. But right now, as we sort of record this in November 24, that isn't available for other sheep types. So if that's you, then you need to be thinking about other ways to do that. There's one way we suggest is a sire team average. So working out, getting all the tag numbers of your animals, of your rams you bought. If you've been buying them off someone that's got or has been generating breeding values, you can pull all that data, bring their latest data down, not the data you bought them on. You need to go to the website and do what we call a sire team audit or sire team averages. A little bit of playing around on Excel, and you get an average of that ram team that you've been using, and that'll give you a pretty good indication of what the average of your flock is. Obviously, the ewes are a function of the rams you've used mostly. So that's a good way to do that. Again, that sounds a little bit complex. It's something we do for clients and something that we really recommend. If you can't get a flock profile, then a sire team average is a good place to start. And within a few hours of playing around on the right websites, you'll get that done. And maybe if we get comments if we make some comments, if you ask for me I can definitely record a video on how you would go about that. And so chuck it out in the comments if that's something that's of interest to you. Bloodline analysis is another option. You can kind of go through and again back on those websites, either Improve in New Zealand or Sheep Genetics in Australia, going through those websites and saying, well, this is where I've been buying my rams from. There's a few rams that other people have used from that bloodline within this system, or they might have been used in merino superior size and a progeny test. Be careful. Like if there's 1 or 2 rams used, you can't, that doesn't tell you what the stud is good at. But if you're getting sort of 10, 15, 20, 30 rams used and you can start to average them and say, well, they are pretty good for these traits and not so good for those traits. That's a good indication of sort of where you're at roughly. But you might have been buying a different grade out of that stud or whatever. So it's not a definitive answer, but it's a better than a zero answer. It gives you a good start as to what might be going on in terms of your genetics. And again, this is all part of a baselining a new client for us, but you can definitely do that yourself and just working out where you're at, because it's really important to know that what your strengths and weaknesses are before you embark on a program of change. And then the final one is trials, and I've got to quote Lintonani, and he quotes someone else, a guy said it to him, one of his clients actually, but his point was trials was for war crimes and sheepdogs, which I found quite funny, and I told him I was going to steal it off him. But the reality is a progeny test or a trial on your farm is, and while some people just want to make a change and get on with it, but if you do a progeny test or you compare sire teams or even individual sires at home on your own conditions, that can be really powerful. You can't unsee the power of genetics once you've done that. And I recommend any of you out there listening that are starting off early in your career, getting your head around going to a progeny test site and seeing the impact of a sire can have is really good for your brain, because it's very, very obvious once you see the impact that a sire can have. And you can look at that on the spreadsheet or on numbers all day long, but actually seeing those sheep that are 5 or 10 kilos heavier or cutting more wool or a much better carcass or whatever the trait that you're chasing. Some obviously lots of the traits we chase you can't see, but the ones you can become really, really obvious in those progeny test situations. So within our ram buying guide, there's a bit of a rundown of how you would set up a trial at home. Again, if you put a comment in the comments, I'll do a video on how you'd set up a progeny test, and that might be a good place to start. But yeah, I recommend doing that if you've got a bit of time and you want to make the right decision, and you've got a few different options out there, or you just want to say, well, this is what we've always done. Let's put a our best foot forward and go and buy a ram team that lines up with the science maybe, and then compare those two. And yeah, again, that's something we'd love to help you work through. But yeah, it's really important that we spend some time working out where we're at now. When it comes to feeding, when it comes to breeding, I think it was when I was sitting down and writing this presentation and thinking about what I was going to say today. I was thinking what are the common mistakes that people made? What do we see that people often do out there that may put them in a place that isn't optimized for their genetic gain? And I've already talked about one, confusing breeding with feeding, and so that's that. How much we're really good feeders, so therefore we think we've all heard the adages that 90% of the breeding goes down the throat and all that sort of stuff, and it's true. You can mask a million sins with nutrition and management, and some of that is environmental. So some people will farm in areas which are really kind to small ruminants, where there's not much worm pressure, it's not that cold, the nutrition's pretty good, every mouthful's pretty high energy or high protein or both, and so yeah, kind of not hard to farm under those environments, but there's not many of those environments around. Often they'll have a period a big period where it's a lot less kind than that. So, but some people are really good at feeding and therefore kind of think they've got the best genetics around, but it's really just nutrition. One of the other things we see is there's a lot of people out there willing to tell you an opinion, and I'm obviously another one of them. Our team here at Next Gen Agri are one of them, but I guess one of the concerns I have with the advice out there is a lot of it is linked to commissions. So one of the things we decided early on in our business was to go without commission, because we want to be independent. Every time we're making some advice for people, telling someone what to do with their breeding, we want to make sure that's from a place of helping them and not lining our pockets. And the way to confirm that or really make sure that happening is to de-link ourselves from commissions, but that's fairly uncommon in the industry. Lots of classes out there, obviously all stock agents are taking commission. Some of them are obvious and are open, and then some of them we don't know about or we only hear about because the industry I'm in. And I've been absolutely shocked as of the further I've got into this industry, how many people are getting what are essentially backhanded payments for their advice or for taking you down a particular driveway or getting you to buy a particular ram. And so that's an issue. Equally, there's lots of people out there who just aren't trained in genetics who have an opinion, and I guess without science, it's just another opinion. And I think one of the things, another thing to be careful of is to work out where this I guess knowledge is coming from, and make sure that you've got a trusted advisor that knows what you want, so understands your business, understands your objective, and understands where you want to go, what you've got currently. So someone who's telling you what to do who doesn't actually know your business is probably a little bit risky as well. So just make sure that the people you are listening to have the knowledge and have your business at the front of their mind, and when they're giving you that advice. There is a million myths out there when it comes to the sheep industry or all livestock, I suppose, and there's lots of things that aren't linked to profitability or the cost of production equation, which we continually refer back to when we're thinking about genetics, because that's really the thing that matters. How do we either increase our productivity or reduce our costs to make sure we're making more money at the end of the day through our genetics? And there's lots of myths out there, like they need long legs to walk to water, or they need long bodies to weigh heavy, or you need a particular tip type on to keep the dust out, or you need short staple or long staple. There's a whole heap of stuff out there. Just question. I think your opportunity is when someone's telling you something that, and whether that's your mum, your dad, your uncle, your auntie, or a trusted stud classer or a stock agent, just ask why or how or where that information has come from, to make sure that it's not just something that gets handed down. Because what happens is we just get handed down information through the generations, and if no one questions it, if no one stops and says, well, hang on, does that make any sense? And some things do, and so there's great stock people out there who have noticed things and have gone on to measure those things, and then have found really good correlations because they've just been those people that are in tune with their stock. But then there's lots of others that have sort of either heard that story or of half a story and then moved on. So there's, I guess just be really careful of some of the myths about what you can and can't do, and you can't cross this with that or whatever, and just continue to challenge it. And then the last common mistake we see made is sort of silver bullet. So these are often your single gene tests. We saw that with the Lincoln foot rot test. Everyone looking for a quick fix, and there's not many quick fixes in agriculture, let's be honest. And so, or if someone's trying to tell you that this particular breed is amazing because it's this and it's that, often there's as much variation within a breed as there is between the breeds. There's as much variation within a stud as there is between studs. So be really, really careful that if you're grasping for a silver bullet when really it's the hard graft or a bit of common sense that you're really looking for. So they're the 4 things we see mistakes made, and you can protect yourself against all of those with just asking good questions. Really, you can, if you just continue to ask why and drill in, and don't take anyone's word for granted, including mine. You can ring me up and challenge me. That's what we're here for. That's what we love doing. And yeah, then you put yourself in a really good position not to go to a lot of effort and then make a mistake at the last hurdle. So everyone likes things in threes, and so sat down and thought about this for a bit, and I think about the 3 P's of breeding success. Planning is key to any success. Purchasing, so that's where you go about when you're bringing new genes into your business. What is the decision making there? And then performance recording. Once you get those genetics home, how are you making sure that you're continually improving them? And yeah, so we'll go through each of those factors in a little bit of detail. This thing is, well, we've been on for a long time making a plan. It's often, if you've ever heard me talk, I talk about how the fact when we often think about genetics, we think about the make you money traits. How do I have more lambs? How do I get more growth? How do I get more milk? How do I get faster growing wool, more wool, finer wool? Often they're all linked to make you money. So it's about, right, our genetics are here. Nutrition is fixed. If we have better genetics or more money-making genetics, we're going to make more money. And that's definitely true. But I think what we need to remember is both sides of the cost of production calculator, and that is that save your money, save your time is just as important to your cost of production as the make your money or the more production part of the equation. So genetics are equally powerful about taking out some of your costs. So that's might be drenching, it might be fly treatment, it might be foot pairing, it might be supplementary feeding when everyone else isn't, and all those sort of things. There's lots of things out there, which we'll cover in future videos for sure as we continue to build out the next gen YouTube site. The last one there is delight a customer, and I use those words very carefully. Delight, not just send something to a customer, because I do think there's some of the traits are not making us more money through production. They're actually or have the potential to make us more money through being more suited to what the customer requires, and that is things like intramuscular fat is the obvious one, or marbling. But then even things like breech wrinkle, which so if you go for low breech wrinkle, you can cease mulesing, and that some customer sets will reward that. And so not all of these are directly linked to profit straight away, but I guess they're the traits where you can say, well, I think this is the way the world's going, and this is the kind of trait that would set me up for a better outcome in that scenario. So making that plan is really important. There's a great resource, which is not on this slide. It's coming up on the next slide on our website under the resources section of Next Gen Agri. There's a heap of free resources there. There's the ram buying guide, which we'll go through trait by trait, which is why I'm not going to do it today, but we will do more videos on that. But importantly, there's the breeding plan there that you can download and then fill it out on your own time with your own business. And definitely recommend you do that. Again, that's something we help people with if you want someone a third party or an independent person helping clarify that. But you can definitely download that and do it on your own. One thing to think of when you are doing that plan, and this probably sounds obvious, but I think some people don't do it, is remember where you are, what you do, what you're good at, what your country's good at, what your farm's good at. There's a vast array of environments where sheep run across the globe, and even within a country, even within a state or a region, there's a big variation in how they run, where they run, the nutrition available, when that nutrition's available, how kind the lambing weather is. All that sort of stuff is quite variable. So remember, when you're thinking about the traits that are important to you, don't think about it in the terms of some pie in the sky perfect farm that you wish you owned. Think about the sheep that you have to run on your farm, and therefore the traits that matter to you. You might need an animal to be pretty robust out there and that can handle a long summer without a lot of feed. Or you might need an animal that's going through a really wet winter and needs really good feet and really good worm resistance, because that's your big challenge period. They're very different scenarios where the challenge period comes for different farming systems, and that needs to be front of mind. And I think it will be, but I thought it was just worth reiterating that's important. So this is the genetic plan that I thought I was going to come up on the slide before. So yeah, that clear breeding objective is what it's called, but really it's a plan. What does your sheep look like for 10 years' time? And that plan takes you through a bit of a decision-making process, hones you down to 5 traits to focus on, which is about enough for a commercial farmer to cover. For our clients, we work through an index and do that with a lot more rigor and end up with an index that's specific for your business. So you can kind of weight a lot more than 5 traits. But you're welcome to do it on your own and just come up with those 5 traits that you think are important, and then that sort of sets you on a really good path to make good decisions from there. One thing that so we're moving on to purchasing now, and I think we have to remember that half of the genes are coming from the size. So the ram buying job is a really, really important one, or whether you're retaining rams or whether you're buying them. And this is, we can probably spend most of the video talking about this, but we need to make sure, whether you're breeding them for yourself or whether you're a stud and you're breeding them for others as well as yourself, or whether you are buying them, it doesn't matter which of those actives you are, they are very important. They're not just animals that you keep the nuts in on the marking cradle and then they become a sire without any measurement, or you get some classes to come in and decide that these are the good ones. If you really are focused on getting that 4% genetic gain, which is, if you're watching this video, that's where I want you to be. I want you to have that aspiration that you will achieve 4 or 5% genetic gain year in, year out in your sheep business. Then you need to be thinking about how I measure those animals, because these are having a big impact. And the bigger or the smaller your flock, I suppose, the bigger impact that any individual ram will have. So if you're sort of around 500 ewes, there's 7 or 8%. Every individual ram is contributing 7 or 8% of the genes of your total flock. As we get into bigger flocks, each ram is having a slightly less effect, so down to maybe 1%. But you compare that to every ewe on the flock out of those numbers, and they're in decimals of percent that ewe is contributing to genetic gain. So even in big flocks, every individual ram purchasing you make has a significant proportion of the genetic gain that you can achieve comes through that ram buying decision. So it's a really, or retaining decision. So it's a really important decision, I guess, is the summary of that. And you need to have good information around that, because you're just as likely, if you're doing it without any information, you're just as likely to get a good one as you are a bad one. And we can then go on and think about how many years those genes stay in the flock, because it ends up being quite a period, 10, 15 years, that bad ram's genetics are still floating through. If you've got a 5-year-old ewe that was sired by that bad ram, and then she has a lamb that then stays in the flock for 5 years, so 10 years or 12 years after that ram purchasing decision, you've got genetics in the flock that are 25% that bad ram still. So it's a significant impact on your flock by making bad decisions around rams. So don't do it. Don't take it lightly. So if we think about that ram buying job, and again, this is probably the number one thing we do for clients, is helping go through this decision-making process. But these are things that you can set yourself up for success at home as well. Firstly, you need that ram team review. So what have you got? What do you got at home? And that's a great thing to do every year. Becomes less important if you've done a pretty good job every couple of years. You probably don't need to do it every year. But that is getting those rams in, looking at the breeding bees, because some of them, will still be pretty good. And if you're using an updated breeding modes, that might have changed over time, and some of them might have improved since you bought them. And so there might be some really good rams there that they might be a bit off because they're a bit skinny because they're old, they're 4 or 5 year old, but they actually might be genetics that are well worth keeping or are as good as what you can buy this year or whatever. And so that happens. We see that. Every now and again we'll stumble across a ram that we're just like, wow, where's this rock star been? And that's so really good idea to do the ram team review. Equally, there's rams in there that look amazing still. They're 3 or 4 year old, look great, they're in their prime, and the wool looks good or whatever, or the carcass looks good. But when you look them up on the data, they've actually fallen away, or you bought them with low data, or they've fallen since then because they're siblings that have been measured, or their mum or their dad or whatever has had more data collected on them, and therefore they've changed. So really important that they get ripped out. So they might be in the prime of their life in terms of how they look physically, but it's really their DNA that matters, and so that's important consideration. So you need to do that well before ram sale season, obviously, to work out what you've got, therefore what you need to buy to replace those rams. Once you've got you've got a plan, and then you've reviewed what you've got, you're then obviously working out which driveway or driveways you're going up to buy those rams, and for lots of people that's the same one as you went up last year, and that's fine. What I would encourage you to do, if you're recently coming into a business and you weren't part of that decision about where those genetics are coming from, it's worth just going through a bit of a process and go, right, what are my options, I suppose? Where else could I go for what's my breeding objective? What is my plan? Therefore, what are the traits that I'm chasing? Therefore, where within a 3 or 4 hour drive can I find, when lots of people go much further than that, but where can I find genetics which suit me the best, and have that thought. It doesn't have to be one driveway. You can buy a few rams from here and a few rams from there. There's lots of people who tell you, again, that's one of those myths that you have to buy from the same place so you get uniformity of type and whatever. But if you look at any stud, and look at the pedigree, there's rams used from all over the place in every one of those studs. And so it always amazes me that for some reason you've got to buy from one stud, whereas the studs can buy from wherever they like. And yes, there is value in sort of evenness, I suppose, but you can buy a very similar type of sheep from lots of different driveways, and because you're using objective numbers, you're buying for DNA. You're not buying for what the environment they've been raised in. So big opportunities to move around a bit. And then once you do obviously find one or two that you're happy with and you've got some rapport with, then it's a good idea to stick with them. But you don't have to do that if things aren't going to plan. So think about that. Where am I going to get these rams from? Feel free to ring up and interview these people. Go for a look on the farm, have a drive around, work out, does this place look like it's going forward? Are they making good decisions? Are they doing their 4 or 5% genetic gain? That's the best question to ask. What's their rate of genetic gain? If they can't answer that question, you've got alarm bells. If they can't answer that with a decent sized number, then you've also got alarm bells. So these are questions. Often we think of, for some reason, we think of ram breeders as being, we can't ask them the tough questions. Yet if we were buying a car, or if we were buying fertilizer, or if we're buying pasture seed or whatever, we might be asking lots of questions of that salesperson about what it is, why this is better than the other. And we should do the same with our ram buying decision. So once you know where you are, you need to get hold of a catalogue early, obviously. Catalogues, and then rank those animals. This is where our indexing tool is really handy. We can actually index those animals across a number of catalogues and therefore work out which ones are best suited to your business. But you can do this through those, using those cutoffs in your plan, going through and ranking those individual rams. Work out that helps you work out which driveway you should be going up. Because if you're going to a place and you're like, well, there's 30 rams there that I can buy on my cutoffs, then that's a good place to be. If you're going to a place that there's only 6 to make your cutoffs and you need 4, then there's chances are that somebody else has driven in that driveway chasing those 6 as well, and so you might have to pay a bit more for them. So yeah, obviously the better or the more aligned you are with your ram breeder in terms of traits that they're good at, then easier it is to buy those rams. But go through, and I'd use a pretty simple 3-tick system, or it's a cross, and then cross is out because it's either the data's really bad or it's got an obvious fault. when you inspect them. But if you're doing this before the day, you want to be sort of, it's cross for the data you don't really look at, and then you 1 tick for the data you'll accept, 2 ticks for data that you're getting pretty excited about, and 3 ticks of stuff that you'd really like to take home. So it's a pretty simple system, and doesn't sound very complicated, but you need some way of ranking them, whether it's stars, ticks, ratings, whatever it is, ratings out of 10, whatever you want to put on them, because essentially on the day you've got to do a lot of physical inspection, and so you don't want to have to be looking at heaps of data as well as the physical attributes of the RAM. If you know it's a 3 ticker when you walk in the shed, you know the data's pretty right. You just have to check the feet, check the wall, check the mouth, whatever, and be happy that that's what you're going to have a crack at. And then because you don't know what happens, all these are auctions, and you sort of don't know until you're under fire how these are going to go. So you need to have it pretty well organised, and so then you can go and overlay you can take a few ticks off or add a few depending on what the physical looks like. And so at the end of the day, you've got your kind of preferred group of animals. You got your next list, and then you got the ones you'd take if you just need one to fill the trailer, and then there's ones that you definitely won't buy. Be really careful to not get sort of thrown by the crowd, I suppose. Often you can be at a place where, like, the worst RAM at one place might be better than the 10th best RAM at another place. And often we'll see RAMs that data's back a bit at a really good catalogue, like where a catalogue's really high data. A RAM that's back a bit in the data might get passed in or sell for $800 or whatever. Whereas if that same RAM was at a different place where that data was actually at the top of the tree, it might be topping the sale. And we see that every sale season. There's some sales that just go off. Well, they might be all going a similar average. Excuse me. They might be going a similar average, but those sales might have the same average, except you might get much better. The value per index point, if you like, is much higher at some places than others. So they're tricks to watch, because sometimes you'll just be like, well, no one's buying those RAMs, so I'm not going to buy them either, even though they look all right. But if they suit your objective, if you've done the physical inspection and they look all right, then hook in. They'll be, we've done a lot of good buying for clients where you're sort of buying at it to a level, even if the sale's going hot, you can still get good value RAMs that might not be all the boxes shaded for all their data, but on average their breeding values are pretty good and actually suit your objective. So hook into that, and then obviously you need to buy to your budget. The important that you know roughly what it is. It's I think there's sort of 2 or 3 kinds of people, I suppose. Some that just don't have enough, don't put enough in the budget to actually ever get decent RAMs, and so you kind of always at the bottom end of the sale. And if that's the way you're going to approach genetics, you need to find a different way than buying them at auction, and that might be talking to someone about breeding them for you at a price, so that it's a very transparent. So they might give you RAM lambs, or if you've only got $1,000 to spend on RAMs, you need to find, whatever the number is, you need to find someone that you can still make genetic gain at that. You don't want to be always buying the worst RAMs at a sale because you haven't got budget for it. I'm not going to tell you what your budget should be for RAMs, but it's higher than what you think sometimes. But be realistic with your budget and think hard about it, rather than go to a sale that you know is going to average $4,000 with a $1,500 budget, and you're going to take the stuff that nobody else, that is definitely at the bottom of the pile. So yeah, be wise think about your budget. There's at least $3,000 or $4,000 difference between one RAM versus the next in terms of its lifetime value to you, and that's probably conservative. So there is big variation in their value to you, and that's not easy to work out, even with the fullness of time, let alone when there's an auction flying. So it is a difficult job to do, but yeah, work out what it is. Equally, we see some people that sort of go in with massive budgets, and I'm not sure that you get value for that either. So we just have to be. You got to land at a number that you're comfortable with and that makes sense. But again, that's a conversation we have with clients, and pretty hard to be generic here on a YouTube video. But right, so moving on from that purchasing, we're down into the measurement or the performance recording P, and And so that's around what are we doing with our ewe base, and remembering that the rams have the biggest impact on our genetic gain. So getting that decision right is important, but we do want to be consistent. We do want to do whatever we do on our ram buying also to be reflected in the ewe strategy, because we don't want to be buying. We see some people who cull lots of ewes on feet, for example, and then go and buy rams from the same place without looking at the feet, and the feet have been trimmed, and we don't know their foot rot status, or we don't know their foot rot susceptibility. You're not going anywhere, because there's not alignment between what your rams are doing and what your ewes are doing, and that's a really important attribute to think about. But it's worth, and part of the final part of that breeding plan booklet does have a quick summary of this ewe selection plan, but something we go through in a lot more detail with clients. But work out what, if you're going to measure stuff, what are you going to measure, and be careful and be thinking about why you're measuring that and what you're going to do with that information. That will then guide how you make your young ewe selection. So which ewes get to stay. 30-40% of ewes get culled every year on different farms, more than that, sometimes less than that, sometimes. Often that's pretty much a physical inspection, which is fraught with danger. So measurement is good around that, awesome, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then equally, what constitutes the requirement? Why would a ewe need to leave the farm? So is that she's scanned once dry, she's scanned twice dry, she lambed and lost, or her teeth are no good, or her udder's no good, or a combination of all that? But that's something, again, documenting what you're doing year in, year out. It's expensive to cull ewes. It costs you a lot of money to get a ewe to that point of going to the ram, and so we see a lot of people loving culling ewes, like that one's a bit skinny, or it's a bit this or a bit that, and they get culled. But if you cull her, you've got to replace it with something, and often if you're using not much measurement, not much planning in terms of that young ewe selection decision, you're basically just keeping a younger version of the one you've just culled, but a much more expensive one. That one that's young might be, so she hasn't got her teeth yet, so she's at lamb money, so she could be a $160, $170 lamb, or even more than that. And then you've got a mutton that you're kicking out that might be, depending on what, at the moment, it's probably only a $60 or $70 mutton. And so it's a massive depreciation on that ewe. And equally, that young ewe is actually not going to have as many lambs in that joining, because she's a young ewe, she's a maiden, whereas the old one might. And that's, again, hard to go through examples, but we've seen that time and time again, that people are culling ewes that really doesn't make a lot of sense. We also love to hook into, love to hook in and cull lots of young ewes without any information, which is also pretty dangerous. So again, think about the strategy, get your plan in place, think about what you're actually going to do, why you're doing it, and is there any science that backs up your decision making? And get in touch with us if you need a bit of a hand with that. The main reason I'm worried about people visually classing ewes without any information is this graph, and we do it as well. Some of our clients don't have single twins, so we have to go in and make decisions on those animals. And there's no doubt that you will cull more twins than singles. This is professional classes in the industry, and this is Bronwyn Clark and Tomo put this data together from the Merino Lifetime Productivity Project over in Western Australia. But this is what happens. So in the keep mob from those professional classes, they've got 70% singles and 30% twins. In the cull mob, they've got 30% singles and 70% twins. So the twins are being culled, and if they have twins out of maidens, it's even worse than that. And so it's really, really risky to physically visual select animals alone, because you will be held to ransom by these environmental effects, and that's not having a crack at professional classes. That's you, me, anyone doing that. Our eyes lie to us because they can't see can't see the environment. They can just see this lovely, fat, shiny single that looks amazing, but she's not. And the same thing if you're going through older ewes, and if you don't know who's lambed and lost, if you haven't got that information, if you haven't worked out what their previous reproductive history, and we do this all the time, we're at studs and we're going, wow, look at this girl, she's come through, she's awesome, great wool, really good condition. And then we look and she didn't raise a lamb last year. And that's why she's got great wool. That's why she's in great condition, because she didn't have to use any energy doing all the hard things that all the other sheep had to do. So, time and time again, we see these environmental effects blurring our decision making, which is why we need data to help us. If you're not going to get your 4 or 5% genetic gain if you're relying on your eyes or somebody else's eyes without putting some data around that. And again, you can do some things visually, but you need to, wherever you can, turn that into information. So if you are measuring stuff, and as we move into a more automated world, EID is getting easier to use and more consistent. And this is something we help lots of people really, I guess, supercharge their use of EID by helping, because farmers are good at measuring stuff. Farmers are great at that, can get sheep, get them weighed, get them condition score, whatever. But it's been a while since you've been, often, some farmers, this is generalisation, but often the desire to sit in front of a spreadsheet and bring all that data together and work out what it means is not high on the agenda of a very busy farmer generally, and so that's something that we help people with. And what we do is sit down and work out what our measurement plan is going to be, and you don't have to do all of this, you don't have to do any of it, but if you're going to measure stuff, what I would encourage you to do is measure holistically. There's no point. You see people just maybe weighing a fleece weight and doing a micron test, whereas all that does is make you more quickly select your singles and cull your twins, because the singles have more wool that's finer than the twins. So be careful by using partial data. So what you want is, obviously their birth status is critical. So the data starts at landmarking. If you should have preg scanned, have them in separate mobs, singles and twins, and then just record those tag sequences that go in the singles and the tag sequence that goes in the twins, and then you can work that out later. So that's really important. How old mum was at that same point. Is it a maiden new mob or a mixed age mob? There are a couple of things that you can capture at landmarking. If you don't get it then, you'll miss it. But they're pretty critical for us to be able to correct it later on. Then weaning weight, condition score. Again, weaning weight's important, but condition score and weight together. We don't want ewes that are... we want a combination of both condition and weight in our ewes, and enables us to make good decisions if we've got both those recorded measures. If you're in a merino, you'll be collecting maybe micron and fleece weight, and if you're in a shedder, you'll be maybe a shedding score. In a composite, you might be scoring something else. Health, so whether the DAGs, any treatment records, have they been drenched? Did they need a drench? Feet and structure are things we can score. Obviously, preg scan continuously. We should be recording what they scan. We can't work out what they lambed at the moment, but that's for another day. Lamb rearing ability, if you do have that information, if there's systems in place now that you can do that more cheaply than the past, and I won't go into that today, but they're the kind of things, particularly those maybe those top 6 points there are pretty important. If you're going to measure anything, measure a few things, because otherwise we see people just measure weaning weight and say, right, well, we're using this sire team or that sire because because the weaning weight is good. But that's not the whole profitability of that animal. That doesn't tell you how much money it's actually making you. So as much as possible, get a general group of data together. So what we do say is, and we've been using this, what we call our next gen selection system that we've sort of put together over the last few years working with clients, and really probably Jane Mulholland and Will Gibson at Amarama Station with Richard and Annabelle Subtle probably really pulled this together in its best form, I suppose, in terms of running it at a commercial scale, thousands of hoggets going through, and actually using this to really do a really good job of selection. And so that's sort of where it was pioneered, and we're rolling it out further from that. But the general sort of notion is eyes to score it, computers to breed it. And so, yes, you use your eyes and fingers and hands to make assessments of animals, but then you can use that. If that gets turned into data, you score it from 1 to 5. You can then bring those things together into a total score for that animal, and then make a really informed classing decision rather than one that's made in a rushed state. So you can be quickly, you're going through, you got to get through 3,000 or 4,000 in a day. You're making a decision in about 3 or 4 seconds as to whether the animal stays or goes. In that same time, you could condition score it, give it a wool colour and a fleece rod assessment, and check the feet and score all those things at about that pace, maybe not quite that fast. But yeah, so you can, if you work out what you want to score before, you can actually do a lot of that. Then you go away, plus the measurements you've collected at other points throughout the time, and then you make a selection decision based on the index. We've got a little tool that does that perfectly, and you can weight those traits differently, and it corrects all those traits for whether they're a single or a twin, and whether they're out of a mixed age ewe or a maiden, whether an early drop, late drop, whatever information you've got, we can correct for. And so that's perfect to really, and then but then we've got that same tool. We'll then basically rank those animals, and we can go and then go, right, here's an auto draft file, take off these ones or whatever. And yes, there's a second handling step in there, but it's a much better decision. And when we do it, we don't have those same 70-30 mistakes. We get the same as many twins as we get singles. We're not culling all those singles, all those twins incorrectly, which is great. So again, that's something you could do yourself, set it up. Bit of work involved, but I think that's where the future will be for commercial farming. So getting towards the end, and I love this quote. If anyone who knows me well knows I use a few quotes, but consistency is what transforms average into excellence. Year in, year out, doing this. None of this is rocket science. None of what I said today is probably new to you. It's about combining your efforts and being really consistent with the work that you're doing. Don't make one decision on rams and then a different decision on ewes, because that's just knocking out your good work. Don't buy a crap ram team one year, then a really good ram the next team next year when you can afford it a bit more. Work out ways that within your business, within your budget, how do you find the best genetics? How do you get 4 or 5% genetic gain through the consistency of what you're doing on your ewes and what we're doing on your rams? And done well, you can definitely pull all that together to achieve much better than average outcomes, because that's what we need in our industry. You can't afford to be average, because average is going out the door, unfortunately. We need our farmers, the people that have taken the time to get this far through a video deserve to be getting their 4 or 5% genetic gain, and you'll get that through your consistency. And finally, what's right isn't always popular, and what's popular isn't always right. Continue to ask why. Continue to ask, are you achieving? What's your genetic gain? Why are you using that sire? Why have you put this group of rams up for sale? You have the right to ask lots of questions, and not to listen to everyone out there telling you what to do. We've got some great examples of people that just stick to the guns. They know what matters, and they just tick over increasing profitability every year through their genetics they use. And there'll be lots of people out there saying, oh, they're ruining their flock because they've used two different ram breeders, and we've got so many examples of that. And then 3 or 4 years' time, the same people are saying, wow, that flock's amazing, and have forgotten that they were detractors originally. And you'll see that all the time, young managers coming in and getting told that you can't do it that way, or young people buying farms, or old people buying farms, or there's lots of people out there being influenced, which is often through no great position of knowledge, just through trying to bring everyone back to average, which is not good enough for us. So challenge what the status quo is. There's a world of opportunity, I reckon, in genetic gain that we deserve to get. Thanks very much for listening. If you've got this far, really, really appreciate you coming along. If you haven't gotten on the fact, we've got a podcast, Head Shepherd. So wherever you get podcasts, that comes out every Monday. Lots of sheep genetics chat on there. This YouTube channel is on the way up. We'll be putting more videos. Your comments, your likes will encourage me to keep doing it. If you want a particular video recorded, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. We'll be doing more out in the yards, obviously, and round about as we travel around. But yeah, and if you would like to understand a bit more about what we do at Next Gen Agri, jump on the website or give me a call. You're welcome to book an hour free, no obligation call with one of our consultants to understand a bit more about what we do, but also just hone right into your business. So we can definitely do that. Just get in touch and we'll set that up. Cheers.